welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
Ooh boy, and we are back and we're live and we're getting set for UFC 273, the big time card. You have two big title fights up at the top, and you're going to want to make sure that you head on over to that chat. Let us know what's going on. We've got Chris. Misery's hanging out. Sharif's over there. Prince Vegeta's son every single gosh darn weekend. Jake Allen is over there doing the damn thing. Louse Non saying salute Allen Bros. And listen, we talk about salute Allen Bros. Might come as a surprise to everybody. This is the anniversary week for Fight Night Picks. This is year 4. Wow. Let's go. Let's get up and go. You weren't there for all of them. The super chat's hitting up by Wayne Kerr saying, let's get into it. Taking the under for the Hamzat Burns and the over for Aljo versus Jan. And I got to say, Matt, Aljamain Sterling looking pretty darn yoked on the scale. Incredibly emotional as well.
He did, and I know we're going to talk more about the weigh-ins and whatnot with our predictions. You can take that as a big positive, as wow, he's so excited to be back, or you can look at that as a bit of a negative. He did look kind of drained going up to the scales, and that is the thing. He did look in incredible shape, and it's been a long time since he has weighed in, so I do worry, okay, did he sort of miscalculate his weight cut because he was in not even better shape, just in different shape? Because you're right, he does look a lot better, but he does physically look different, so I'm curious if the weight cut was a little bit different for him.
I'm totally good with it. I mean, listen, he's been away for just over a year since that first fight against Piotr Jan. That one is in the co-main event. The question up there, 2 title fights, any and news, and 47% saying yes, 53% saying no. They think that Aljamain Sterling's going to keep his belt, and they think in the main event, you're going to have the man himself, Alexander Volkanovski, as champ. But we have a big-time card coming up. Obviously, a big talking point for this one is the fact that we've lost some big fights. I know yesterday, Tybura out of his bout against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. They couldn't find a guy off the street for Jairzinho to fight. So now we're here. We're without that one, but we still do have a big-time heavyweight fight. Aleksei Oleinik taking on Jared Vanderaa, the fight you never knew you needed. And that one just added on short notice with Ilir Latifi unable to make the walk a couple of weeks ago against Oleinik. As people know with Fight Night Picks Kicks, we throw it on over to our Fight of the Night screen, and then we go bottom to top and once more to give those final picks and predictions for this card. I know me, myself, and I have a switch of a pick due to the unfortunate events out of yesterday, and that's the whole point of doing the show. We had a big-time super chat there from Sharif. We've got Fearless Red 25 saying, got me some Hamzat, but Burns might burn some people, and I think that might be the case. He is a big underdog. So let's throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen and talk about the co-main event of the evening. Aljamain Sterling, Piotr Jan. Their first fight, a lot of fun. Their second fight, a lot of bad blood. Piotr Jan on the scale going, that was really weird.
It's so funny, though.
That was weird. And if you don't believe me, it is real. And for Aljamain Sterling, again, emotions flowing. And obviously for him not going to have Matt Serra in this camp, he will have Marab. He will have, Ray Longo that was on, Kevin Can Wait. So
is he a vampire? Who knows?
Harry Connick liked the friggin' lasagna. But Matt, when it comes up to this fight, we have a lot of fun. What are you saying here?
If you're not excited for a Piotr Jan fight, are you really an MMA fan? Like, that truly is the question. All of his fights are absolutely wild from the second they begin until they end. And this rematch against Aljo, there has been some bad blood behind it. And I do feel like people are hyped for this matchup the second time around. Their first fight was very competitive, was very fun. Jan definitely was starting to pull away, though, right before the no contest. And I was watching something today. It was an interview that Robert Whittaker had done, and it was just sort of him talking about this fight. I thought it was kind of interesting. He had said, with Piotr Jan and going into this rematch, you can't think that Jan lost their first fight. It's not that Aljo won it, it's that Jan lost it with his disqualification. I thought that was really interesting, just sort of getting Whittaker's perspective on this matchup. But I think it's going to be a great fight. Like you had mentioned, if Aljamain Sterling fights half as good as he looks coming into this fight, I think he's going to do pretty good because physically he looks tremendous coming into this matchup. So maybe he was compromised physically going into their first fight like he had claimed, because, you know, that was a pretty serious surgery he had afterwards. So maybe we're just going to see the best version of Aljo today.
And I really do hope that we get that. Obviously, Donald E. Guys hitting it up over there in the chat. I mean, come on, Marab! We won't get to see that, of course, in that corner. That's one of those things that you really want to see. But once again, this should be a great fight. And then we talk about it, you know, in terms of creepy, weird yells. All I have for you from yesterday is the fact that Khamzat Chimaev looks like a totally different type of human being when compared to Gilbert Burns.
How does he cut all this weight?
That's it. Like, the size between these two guys. I mean, again,
ridiculous.
Khamzat, so much taller, so much bigger. But when it comes down to Gilbert Burns, the conversation really comes back to the fact that in terms of skill development and in terms of overall striking acumen paired with the grappling, Gilbert Burns is a complete package. And I know the UFC on that weigh-in show, I watched it today because I can't take time in the middle of the day to watch a 2-hour show of weigh-ins. But I watched it this morning, and when they were kind of talking about Gilbert Burns, it was like, listen, you can't forget, this guy's the second-ranked welterweight. He's a giant underdog to a guy ranked out of the top 10. And for Khamzat Chimaev, like, again, we see the wins at middleweight. We see the wins at welterweight. He's barely been tested. What is it? Over 200 total strikes thrown. He's only accepted 2. And then it's just over 100 significant strikes thrown. Only accepted 1. So it's ridiculous, that line for Khamzat Chimaev. But for Gilbert Burns, again, this is one that when I look at the line, I just go, ooh, that's a poppin' popcorn.
Shout out to Gerald Mearshart for having a great sense of humor, by the way. I don't know if you saw his tweet from earlier today, but he's like, if you guys want to get absolutely trashed by the end of the night, have a drink every time they show Khamzat sending me to the Shadow Realm. I thought that was pretty funny, so good on you, Gerald, for having a sense of humor. This should be a great fight, though, and I put out a tweet earlier in the week, or a poll asking which title fight people were more excited for. All of the replies were just people telling me how they were more excited for Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev, and it's really hard to blame any of those people. Isn't it wild that in the year 2022, we're sitting here talking about how Gilbert Burns might win a fight with his striking, not his grappling? Like, that's the evolution that this guy has taken throughout these past few years. Like you said, you don't get to becoming the second-ranked welterweight in the world by accident. You don't just get one fluky win and now you're, arguably a world championship caliber fighter. I think this can be a great fight because for as excited that everyone is for Khamzat, and how can you not be excited for him? He's this good. Gilbert Burns is going to test him in some kind of area, so it should be really fun to see how he's able to test Khamzat.
Prince Vegeta's son saying fight of the night, Gall versus Mallet. That could definitely be a good one. McGroovy saying Mickey Gall or Mike Mallet. McGroovy, we will get there because, as you know, with Fight Night picks and with question mark kicks, we go all the way from the bottom fight on the card back up to the tippity top, Matt. 253 joining in so far. That number grows incrementally as the show goes on, and the only way to get it up there is if you keep hitting up that super chat. Southpaw Pick saying, I'm here to apologize for Craig, or to Craig for his Jacasey pick. Let's go! No, I'm just kidding. And really, when it comes to this one, I saw a lot of it over there in the chat about the Tybura fight against Rosenstrike. That one is off. That much is true. Sharif is looking for a parlay. I do have one, and it involves an underdog that not a lot of people agree with me on, that we actually both agree on. So it should be a fun one there. Obviously, you can trail or you can pass. You can do whatever the heck you want. But Matt, what you can't trail or pass on is the first fight on the card. We have Julio Arce taking on Daniel Willycat, or Daniel Santos. His name is Daniel. He goes by either, and this guy looked great on the scales. And guess who didn't? Julio Arce. Julio Arce missed weight by half a pound, coming in at 136.5. You hate to see it. You really do. And it's one of those things that I even touched on it in the original video. Right at the end, I said, hey, oh, by the way, one of these days it's going to catch up to him. He's 32. He used to fight at 145, now moved down to 135. Is it going to be the division that he sticks at? Are we going to see his chin really start to fade? We saw it tested against Yadong.
Okay.
It failed that test, but regardless, when it comes to this one, Matt, Laos Nan saying Santos looked on fire at the weigh-ins. When I look at this one, listen, I'll throw the pick out there at the start, but then the caution comes in. Again, Arce misses weight. I still have Arce in this fight. Daniel Santos isn't just a ball of energy of spinning things, though they do work. He has 3 spinning attack knockout wins. But for Daniel Santos, like I said at the start of the week, he's a Dan Uggla striker. Like, we're keeping everything high and tight. We're all forearms. And what I like out of Julio Arce is he's one of those guys, full extension, a lot of power on the end of his shots, and a lot of really nice leg kicks out of him.
But Julio Arce is making it harder and harder for people like us who have kind of been his defenders for the past while to keep on defending him, because he's had one of these resumes where it's okay. He comes up short against some really good fighters, and he might lose close fights to really good fighters, but when you actually watch the performances, you're like, okay, Julio Arce is genuinely a talented fighter, though. But with these weight misses, and with him just kind of getting the doors blown off him against Song Yadong, we do need to see an impressive performance, and it would have been nice if he was able to have the impressive performance after making weight. So that really is unfortunate, because really no matter what happens in this fight, we're still going to have to see sort of a more professional fight week from Julio Arce. You know, like, we really won't be able to get back on board his hype train, if ever there really was one, to be honest, but still, we won't really be able to believe in Julio Arce until we see him do the combination of make weight and have the impressive performance. I do agree with you, though. I still have him in this matchup, because Arce is somebody who, for the longest time, we've been talking about how skilled he is. He has great low kicks. He does have very good boxing.
He beat Dan Ige in his UFC debut.
Exactly. And everybody knows how good Dan Ige is. Like, the Korean Zombie is getting a title shot today because he beat Dan Ige in a 5-round fight. So that tells you how good Ige is. I don't think Arce's on that Korean Zombie Dan Ige of 2022 level, but I do think he'll be able to get the win today.
And MPTV, I definitely agree with you in this one. He tried cutting that weight so hard, showed up towards the end of the weigh-ins. He has 1 round in him to do something. And listen, I can see this fight going a lot, and I mean a lot, like Trevin Jones and Said Yakub Kakrakhmanov, where it's Jones looking like regular Jones and then falling off a cliff in the second round and in the third round. I can see that of Julio Arce, and he's one of those guys, like, you look at it in the Aljamain Sterling corner where you've got Longo and Weidman MMA. Julio Arce, it's Tiger Shulman, and he's the face of the gym, but Julio Arce is the co-owner of that gym. So if I go over to @FightNightPicks, over on the Instagrams, in the story, 70% of the fans have Arce to win, 30% going with Santos. And if you
I'm surprised it's that high.
Well, if you like Santos at that price, because I didn't put those out there until this morning, so it's not like a yesterday thing. Excuse me, Arce went down as far as a minus 210 favorite or thereabouts, minus 187 right now. Daniel Santos on the comeback, plus 156. Wade's Venture saying, I've got Arce with the chickadee check mark over there. And Hernan is saying Arce will lose by submission. 1D Ammo saying Arce getting knocked out. Matt, the comment section, a lot of people going with Daniel Santos. I think if Daniel Santos wins, it's going to be far more impressive than if Julio Arce wins.
I would agree with that 100%, but we all know what happens every time I change my pick on one of these episodes. I end up doing it, and then the person who I had originally picked ends up winning. So I'm going to stick with Arce. Again, there are so many red flags with him missing weight, and like you had mentioned, him at 135, is this really the weight class for him at this stage of his career? Well, probably not, since he did miss weight. So since there are so many red flags, I would not tie this to a parlay. I wouldn't put any money on this pick, but no. I am going to stick with Julio Arce as the official pick.
This is one of those ones that you look at the end of the year and you go, their percentage was either great or terrible, and this is one that affects it, but I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. So
just sticking with Arce?
Yeah, sticking with Arce. So we move on to our next pick, fight, either or. I'm going with Piera Rodriguez, and I don't normally start videos out this way. I don't normally start these ones on question mark kicks that way, but Hansen looked complacent on the scale and missed weight.
But not in like a good way, like Gegard Mousasi before he's about to defend a Bellator title. I've been saying this for a minute now, and I'm not some great oracle because I've said this. I just don't think Kay Hansen's at the UFC level. She's 7-5 in a not very deep weight class, and she hasn't fought the highest level of competition. It'd be different if she was fighting absolute killers throughout her run, and that would explain why her record isn't great. Again, I'm probably the biggest Matt Brown fan in the world, and if you just look at his resume, you probably think he's a scrub.
He started in the UFC at 7-5.
Exactly, but when you look at his resume, you're like, oh my goodness, Matt Brown's fought nothing but world-class competition. So there is an explanation for why his record looks the way it is. I just don't think Kay Hansen is at this level. Now, could she go back to Invicta and maybe go on a run like Angela Hill was able to do at the start of her career? That's something that we don't really see happen all that often nowadays. I'm kind of surprised because the few fighters who have been cut from the UFC, gone to Invicta, and come back have had a certain level of success, because I do really think that that's a great developmental league for a lot of fighters. And honestly, if Kay Hansen was able to use that division a little bit more, I think she might be able to work her way back to the UFC level, but I do not have her in this fight.
So I had Kay Hansen at the start of the week. You folks know why. I mean, again, she has boxing experience, but what is it? It's 1-4, so it's not the best. Then you'd say, okay, well, experience is experience, but not when you're 1-4. It's not, and they're not throwing you out there against the best boxers when you're 1-4 in boxing like that. So you look at her overall MMA record. She was able to beat Jinyu Fry, which is a win that continues to age well, but she wasn't winning because she wasn't able to get the takedown right up until the end of it. Then she gets the submission. Her second fight out there, I thought she beat Poppins. Most people thought she beat Poppins, but Poppins gets the win, albeit an incredibly close one. And then you look at her last time out there, and she takes on a tricky fighter in Jasmine Jasudavicius, up a weight class, isn't able to get the win. But Matt, the real trouble with that, and then with the weight miss, and I think it ties in really well, is the fact that that fight just happened. Like, that fight wasn't all that long ago. That was back in January on the 22nd, when she takes on Jasudavicius at UFC 270. So Kay Hansen, pay-per-view fighter. They put her on 2 pay-per-view cards in a row. And if you really do look at it, for the lady herself, Piera Rodriguez, great right hand, great left counter, really mixes in her combinations well, but tends to brawl a little bit. Takedown defense isn't all that great. So that's why I had Kay Hansen at the start of the week. But again, for me, and one DM was saying Rodriguez too stationary, she will take her down easily. I agree that way. Like, I again, don't have the highest of confidence. And when I've switched picks this year, they've been bad. So Piera Rodriguez open. The line was at par. She's minus 128 right now. Kay Hansen at a plus 107. So Matt, I don't have a lot more to say about this fight, other than the fact that, again, the fact that Hansen missed weight really pushed me away from her over to Piera Rodriguez.
For Hansen to win, she's going to need the takedown, so it really comes down to how confident are you in her gas tank overall. Because let's say she is the much fresher fighter in the third round. Well, even if her takedown attempts are being defended early, if she does have the better cardio, maybe she'll be able to get on top as the fight progresses. I just don't think it's going to happen. That's why I got to stick with Rodriguez.
And usually Hansen's cardio is not too bad, but 5 of 23 on her overall takedown attempts in the UFC. It hasn't really worked out all that well.
And it's not great, too. When that's something everybody can agree on, is like, that's what you need to go out there and get victories at this level for. When your percentage is that low, it doesn't really reinforce a lot of confidence.
Wake Up Diuma saying, yeah, the boys. Marquet, yeah, come on, pal. Who else do we have over there in the comments section? Todd hanging out. VT Clay is over there saying, I suspect. Woo, let's see. I suspect didn't try to cut all that hard and might be counting per slot. Yeah, that's one of those ones. I mean, it really is tricky when you have fighters missing weight that way. So Jared Vanderaa, this is his 5th fight in the UFC. And for one of the 5 fights, he's weighed under 265 pounds. Just once, he weighed 264. He weighs in above that, so we're good in the Jared Vanderaa book of things. The weird thing, Matt, and I want to make sure that I get this one right, so I'm going to clickety-click over there, and we're going to have a look at it, because Aleksei Oleinik, the last time that he fought was against Sergey Spivak. He weighed in at 228. He was supposed to fight Alir Latifi. This one was just a couple of weeks ago. He weighs in,
we were both probably too excited for.
Yeah, he weighed 246. Coming into this one, we're right up there near that same mark at 244. So Aleksei Oleinik, since the last time he fought, Matt Simone hitting up the super chat, saying, please shout out Nicole Munoz. Nicole,
shout out.
How are you,
What's
Matt?
up, Nicole Munoz?
Giant super chat driving the show. The super chat's going nuts today. So Matt, Todd hitting up the super chat. Why does Buffer say KO in the very first round? Insult to injury for someone who was KO'd. What was the thing Bruce Buffer was doing the other day? Oh, the judges have it a unanimous decision, 30-27, and then just did it. He didn't go 30-27, 30-27, 30-27.
Well, no, if they're all, he normally does. It's only if it's like 30-27, 30-27, 29-28, he'll say the other one, but he normally just says 30-27.
I don't know. There's something weird about it, but regardless.
But it's more of like a promotional tool for the person who won, though, instead of him trying to talk badly about the person who just lost. But I couldn't imagine, like, I pitched in baseball, and the worst feeling in the world is you give up a bunch of runs, and then there's this BS ritual in baseball where you have to stand there while everybody watches, while a grown man in pajamas walks out onto of the field and then has to take you off of the field. It's not a very fun place to be. I'd imagine that's what it feels like.
Derek hitting up the super chat saying, support Fight Night Picks. Listen, if you can't hit up the super chat, just toss us a like. It'd be very much appreciated. So, Q&K parlay, when I look at this overall, I'm going with Jared Vanderaa. And it's not going to be a hot one, but minus 125, giant gleek out there that the people couldn't see off screen.
That was intense.
But Matt, when it comes to this fight, yeah, for me, I'm going with Jared Vanderaa in this one. Now, the tricky thing is, he comes in on short notice. He's a guy that, if he's able to work in his own takedown attempts, he normally has a lot of success. He's a big ground and pound guy. You saw it when he took on his big time fight there against Mr. Tafa, that they slugged it out. It was a lot of fun to watch. There's a lot of blood on Vanderaa, and he probably had a smile and a weird wave. But when it comes to this fight against Aleksei Oleinik, I have a hard time taking a guy at 44 with 75 pro fights to get a win over Vanderaa. Now, the only thing I will say, and VT says I think Aleksei is a legend, is the fact that Aleksei Oleinik, even against Derek Lewis, had a ton of success and got him in spots that would have submitted, I don't know, what would you say, 70% of the heavyweight division? Like,
really?
really?
Though, because that's the problem. Like, how deep were those chokes? Because at 40-something years old, we don't really know what kind of squeeze Oleinik has. You're right. He can get into those positions. I'm just curious if he still has the strength and the explosiveness to really finish a lot of those submissions. But I do agree with you. He can get anybody tied up into a pretzel. It's just a matter of, can he tie it tight enough to really maintain that type of a choke? It will be interesting. I agree with you. If Vanderaa can get on top of Oleinik, he will have success. But I wouldn't grapple with Aleksei Oleinik even at 44 years of age. It's just one of those things, like, why even play that game with him at all? Because he is a shark when it comes to jiu-jitsu, and he's so unique. Nothing he does really makes sense. He doesn't really involve like an open guard all that much. He's much more head and arm choke oriented. He's just a very unique grappler, and it's very interesting to see how fighters try to solve his puzzle. I do think Vanderaa on the feet, though, is going to be a big problem for Oleinik.
So we had Carlo M hitting up the super chat, Jack Lawson hitting up a big one saying, none of us think Aljo is winning in the poll. We all view Jan as the champ. Well, listen, Jack, he is the interim champ, so there is that. Piotr does have a belt, but I don't think we've really seen it all week, which is kind of strange.
It is.
Interim champ. So it isn't an and new to us. Jan and Volk, each by TKO. Boers with a quick standing KO of Burns. That's a big, big one right there. But when I look at this fight, Matt, again, I've got Vanderaa to minus 125. If we have a look at the fans over on at Fight Night Picks, so again, you guys have Arce, 65% of Piera Rodriguez, 60% going with Aleksei Oleinik. So if you feel that way, so be it. Again, I do have a hard time. When Kenny Williams says Vanderaa is just a bigger Jean Vellante, I take that one to heart. I've got a lot to say about Jean Vellante next week. We haven't taped the videos yet, but I have a ton to say about Jean Vellante and the Chris Barnett-Martin Budai fight. But yeah, Matt, in this one, I'm going against the green, and I'm going with the man himself.
Against the green, isn't he the favorite?
And Vincent Chapman saying, Fight Night Picks, you lot need to do your research. Vincent, I don't know, man. I just do these notes for you know, shirts and giggles.
Wow.
All right,
You
Matt.
really got him, Craig. Yeah, I think Vanderaa, here's the thing. It's going to be very difficult for Oleinik to secure a takedown in this fight. And at 40-something years of age, he doesn't really have the athleticism to really explode for a takedown. Like, Chael Sonnen was able to extend his career very long because in the back pocket, no matter how hurt he got on the feet or how basic his boxing was, his wrestling was still good enough to where he could go out there and get a double leg takedown at really no matter what stage his career he was at. Oleinik doesn't really have that explosiveness in his game, and that's why I think he will struggle.
All right, Matt, so move on to our next fight. We have Mickey Gall taking on Mike Mallet. And it seems like for Mallet, there's a lot of confidence on him. All week, all I've seen is Mike Mallet. This guy's going to get it done. The sky is the limit. He's the Muay Thai boxing and BJJ coach. Vincent, make sure you write notes off of that one. Over at Team Alpha Male, it's on their website. Even next weekend, we have another coach making his UFC debut. That one is Trey Ogden with Glory MMA and Fitness. But when it comes to this one, Matt, for Mike Mallet, we've kind of seen him a little bit here recently where in these two fights off the big layoff that he's had, he's kind of looked a little flat-footed, and he almost needs to get punched not once, not twice, about 20 times, and then maybe even drop before he gets into his fight. So it has been weird watching Mike Mallet, but I will say, out of his last two fights, two big finishes, drops an opponent with a jab in his second to last fight with CFFC, jumps on the back with no hooks, and he's able to get the rear naked choke. And in his last fight against Matrisky over on Dana White's Contender Series, his opponent goes for kind of like a lazy double, leaves his neck out there, and Mike Mallet says, hey, I'm pulling guillotine here, and he's able to get it. So, Matt Simone hitting up a big-time super chat. Please wish my cat Hans a happy birthday.
Shout out to the cat Hans.
Matt Simone, I know we've talked about Hans on this channel through the
kid.
super chat, so really do appreciate that one. And, Matt, hopefully it's a perfect birthday for Hans, unless Hans is a person, and you're referring to Hans as a cat. And then it gets a little bit awkward. But Matt, when it does come to this fight, I know at the start of the week we're split on the pick, but Mike Malott, ton of public support of it.
Because if you're confident in either person, we really need to have a long conversation. Like, I have Mike Malott, you have Mickey Gall. We both can see the other side of the argument, though, or at least I hope we can. Because, Mickey Gall, here's the thing. Does he throw kicks? Not at all. Does he get hit too much on the feet? Yes, he does. The weird thing about him is he does have good punching power, and he has been able to improve his stand-up, but I don't think Mickey Gall can go out there and really outstrike people for 15 minutes in an MMA fight. I think he can hurt people on the feet and then finish them with his jiu-jitsu. I just have a really hard time thinking that with his somewhat basic stand-up, he is going to be able to go out there and out-jab, out-leg kick, or at least do techniques that can get him enough money in the bank to where he can win rounds against other UFC levels of competition. But the real question mark is Mike Malott that UFC level of competition? Because for Mickey Gall, he's been 2 years away from being 2 years away for a while now, and we really haven't seen the improvements that, or at least I thought we were going to early on in his career, and that's the thing. Maybe I put too high of a ceiling on Mickey Gall for how he started his UFC career. Like, he won one fight on the regional scene and then fought CM Punk, and he's pretty much been in our MMA lives ever since, so maybe it's my bad for thinking that he could potentially become a top-tier fighter one day. I just feel like he is going to have to add another wrinkle to his game, and for somebody who recently has added the newest striking component to his game, that's already a big improvement. So I do think it's going to take quite a bit more time until we see another big improvement from Gall, but I do think he is going to have to add something, add a more complete kicking game, at least become a better wrestler, because we know how good his jiu-jitsu is. His boxing is improving. If he could improve that transition in between the two, I do think he could gain momentum in the UFC, but I do think Mike Malott's going to be able to really jab him apart at distance and really use his kicks and use his distance really effectively in this matchup.
Matthew Schwartz saying, picking Malott, disclaimer, I'm a Canadian, up there in the comments section. We also have the Goat Ramus saying Malott was the power of Justin Bieber Timbits on his side, so he's got those Tim Biebs. Never tried them. Thought about trying to order them, and then I just ended up with regular Timbits. Raw Torque saying Mickey Gall is at Sanford MMA now. He is. We have a few Sanford fighters on this card. Jason Jackson helping them out. Absolutely love myself a little bit of Jason Jackson. And we also have the man himself, Matt Simone, hitting up the super chat once more. Matt Simone, the MVP of today's show. Everybody give a slow golf clap to Matt Simone for helping out the channel. Last 6 months of MMA picks there. Listen, Bert does good work. It sucks that that's the way that things have gone.
Happy you're back on board, though, Matt.
But good to have you nonetheless. And so, Matt, when it does come to this fight, I do have Mickey Gall. Again, we saw the striking improvements against Jordan Williams, who, if he's anything, is a striker, but his chin has been tested. Mickey Gall, the bigger man at 170. Mike Malott, we've seen him. And again, really grow into his body since Hakeem Dawodu.
He looks much bigger, too.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing about him as well when it comes to Mike Malott, this is a guy that if you saw him before Contender Series, he's got Uriah Faber, he's got the guys from the gym that you all know and love at Team Alpha Male. He also had fellow Atlanta Canadian there, Matt. Did you see it on the Instagrams from his fight on Dana White's Contender Series? I'm hitting you with something you don't know. He had Gavin Tucker there as well. Wow. So you love to see it from Titans MMA. That was where Malott got to start as a coach, as the Muay Thai coach. But again, we do differ on the pick in this one. I've yet to see it from Mike Malott, where I've been incredibly impressed, especially on the short 2-fight stint that he's had since he's taken that time away. For me, I like the activity out of Gall. I like some of the striking improvements, but don't necessarily like him to strike against Malott. But I do have Gall in this one. So Matt, we'll move into our next fight. We have Aspen Ladd taking on Raquel Pennington, and this is where I'm going to get a big boo. Matt Simone might not want to go with this one. I've got Aspen Ladd as the second leg of the QMK parlay. It's wild that I have Jared Vanderaa and Aspen Ladd in anything, but I can get Ladd at a plus 150, so it's plus 350. And Matt, I talked about it earlier on in the week, so I will go through my notes because I want to make sure I read these ones out. Aspen Ladd in the UFC. Not even in the UFC. Aspen Ladd over with Invicta. Minus 270 against Eubanks. Minus 250 against Landsberg in the UFC. Minus 185 against Evinger in the UFC. Minus 260 in the rematch against Eubanks in the UFC. Minus 135 against Jermaine Durandamy. Minus 175 against Kunitskaya. Minus 135 against Norman Dumont. If I can get Aspen Ladd at plus 150 against Raquel Pennington on short notice, I will go with Aspen Ladd. Macho Man laughing at me. Everybody laughing at me. And that's fine. And one Diamo saying Ladd only won and making weight. And a lot of people going with Pennington here, Matt. So I'm going to disagree, but I do have Aspen Ladd.
I thought physically Aspen Ladd looked really good, honestly, on the scales. And for someone who we do question, not her dedication to the sport, I shouldn't go that extreme, but we do question her commitment to making the weight and this weight class. I think that's probably the best way of saying it, because she did have that one sort of one-off main event at 145, and we don't really know what the 145-pound division for the women is at right now. Like, are they going to keep on having fights there? Like, we have no idea. So it was nice to see Ladd make 135 and seem to make it without too much issue. If we do see the best version of Aspen Ladd, though, I think the best version of Ladd is better than the best version of Raquel Pennington. And I know Pennington fought for the title, but that was a weird title shot. She beat Miesha Tate, broke her leg, took a year and a half off, and then fought Amanda Nunes in Brazil and didn't even land a single significant strike, and completely washed out. So her title shot's not one of the most concrete ones in UFC history. And for Ladd, her on her best day, go back to the Yana Kunitskaya fight. She took her down and beat the brakes off her. Like, she beat her like she owed her money. It was awful to watch. And I really do think that if we see that skill set from Aspen Ladd with her physicality from the weigh-ins, I do think that fighter will be able to beat Raquel Pennington. Now, I actually think this fight's going to be pretty fun to watch. I have higher hopes for this than I think most people do, because Pennington is just so well-rounded. Like, she's not weak in any one area, so she will offer a good challenge to Aspen Ladd, but I agree with your underdog pick. I do think that if Ladd is able to get this fight to the mat, she has a much higher chance of actually getting a finish in this fight than Raquel Pennington does.
The votes on this one at Fight Night Picks, 210 going with Ladd, 193 going with Pennington. Like I said, I have Ladd as an underdog at a plus 150 or thereabouts. If you look at the comeback on Pennington, minus 175. So again, it seems like a lot of people going with going with Raquel Pennington on this one. I'm in disagreement. I'm actually going with her on the QMK parlay with Aspen Ladd, that is. So Matt, we'll move on to our next fight, and we have a look at a tricky one between Anthony Hernandez and Josh Fremd. Now, for Anthony Hernandez, I said it at the start of the week, he's the real McCoy of LFA title fights because he was able to get it done. He was able to win it. He's got that belt. Aaron Rodgers, he always wanted it. Well, Anthony Hernandez actually had it. And if you look at it for Josh Fremd, he won the first fight of the quarterfinals. He beat Bruno Oliveira, who's coming off a knockout loss not that long ago over on Dana White's Contender Series against, Carlos Alberg, that guy. And when you look at it for Josh Fremd, goes in there and takes on Gregory Rodriguez, and he gets finished himself. And Gregory had good head movement, great boxing, and he was able to get that win. So, Matt, when I do look at this fight, I mean, Josh Fremd, he's a guy, and I see FM saying Fremd is nasty. Josh Fremd went to D3, wrestled. He wasn't able to make it work, so he moves on from that. He's a guy out of the Pennsylvania area, moves his training camp to Colorado, finds Factory X. We get some Factory X guys on this card, next weekend's card. And the UFC's graphic at the start of the day tried to match him up with his Factory X teammate. They put Alexander Hernandez in the picture, so good job, guys. They deleted that one. And Ice Viking saying, Josh was never my friend. I think that's great. That's hilarious. I say things like that all the time. But again, MPTV saying Fremd's grappling is way too weak. I like his offensive wrestling, but I don't like it against Anthony Hernandez. I like the way that Josh Fremd utilizes his jab, the occasional kick, but once Fremd's able to figure out distance, most guys have nothing to do. They can't get past that pop, double, and then he throws a right every now and again. When you look at it for Hernandez, his best activity is to come in close, get in tight, collar up. If he's able to throw some shots on the way, it's gravy. And once it gets down to the mat, we're really in Hernandez's world. So for me, again, start of the week I had Hernandez, still have Hernandez here. I'm eager to see, though, again, both these guys in the cage, because Josh Fremd, big guy, tall guy.
He is, and you always got to worry when you're fighting a striker who is big and tall and very rangy, who does have that wrestling component of their game, so where they can switch it up. Here's the thing about Hernandez, though. Like you said, you don't want to grapple with this guy pretty much at all. If you can submit a guy known as the Black Belt Hunter, and I know cardio had a very, very large part to play in that. All of it, but still, that is a very, very big notch in someone's resume to say, like, hey, I was able to submit Adolfo Beer in an MMA contest. That means a lot to me. The thing about Hernandez, though, is he's one of these fighters who his strengths are very apparent, but so are his weaknesses, and it feels like every single time he goes out there, you're just looking for him to sort of shore up one of those holes, and can he improve a little bit more each and every time out? I'll be really interested to see where Hernandez falls and if he ever can get into the top 15, because I do think that there is a very entertaining fighter there. There's a very exciting fighter there, but it will be interesting to see once he does get matched up with a more consistent sort of borderline top 15 guys. Like him versus Gerald Meerschaert, I think would be a phenomenal fight. I think that'd be a really fun one that hopefully we could see in the near future, but I do have Hernandez in this fight today.
Short notice for Josh Fremd, and the last time Anthony Hernandez fought at the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena in Jacksonville, Florida, it was against Kevin Holland, where he got knee to the body and he fell down. So yeah, I mean, both of us going with Hernandez in this one. If we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes, 72% going with Hernandez. It's 286 votes to 112 for Fremd, and it's going to be a heck of a fight, Matt. When we move on to our featured prelim, Darian Weeks being brought in to lose, but Matt, Darian Weeks is my favorite underdog of the big underdogs on this card. And Ian Garry, again, I look at Ian Garry as a super prospect, and coming into the UFC had really, really lofty goals in my own head of where this guy's going to go. The Jack Grant win. If I go down through Ian Garry's record, I go down through and I watch his performances. Let's say he decides to get really aggressive early. He wants to go for some of those nice throws. He wants to go in with some of his groundwork. Ian Garry is great that way. And you look at the way that his career starts, decision win, second round knockout over Matteo Caglia. You look at the next one against Figlock, you've got a rear naked choke, you got a punches to a headlock against George McManus, beats Tracy by ground and pound, beats Rostam Akman, the man with the hair sweater, by punches and a head kick. He beats Jack Grant by decision, blown up lightweight. Then he beats Jordan Williams. But Matt, Jordan Williams cracked the crap out of Ian Garry, and he went again and again and again and again. To me, it looked like, again, because it's fresh in my head, and it's stupid that recency bias, this is the way my brain works, but I went back and watched a lot of Martin Buday tape to get ready for his fight against Chris Barnett next weekend, and Buday, to win the Octagon title, gets backed up against the fence for a round and a half, a round and 3 minutes, then all of a sudden it's like something switches in his head, and he goes, yeah, oh, I can throw a punch, and he throws a stupid jab and drops his opponent. It's really weird. But when I look at it for Ian Garry, he gets punched and punched and punched and punched and countered and punched, and then all of a sudden he's able to get it done. But against Darian Weeks has great boxing. Darian Weeks has really good offensive wrestling. Darian Weeks does not have great defensive wrestling. And Darian Weeks is a guy that spent a lot of time, IMMAF, has an incredibly extensive amateur record, just like Makayev did a couple of weeks ago that we saw him make his debut against Cody Durden. So again, for me, I look at Ian Garry as a pretty big favorite on this card. And honestly, I don't have the confidence to say Ian Garry's going to win this fight like 9 out of 10 times. Like, I don't feel that way when I look at this one.
Maybe against future levels of competition, but I do feel like the whole in Darian Weeks' game, with that being his wrestling defense, is just going to play into the game plan of Ian Garry, because Garry does have really good power up close with his boxing, and that does help him because he's naturally in that position to where he can hurt you with the hands up close, but he can also shoot for takedowns in that same range. So I do agree with you. I do think against just an average unranked welterweight, if you will, I do think that there are some holes in Ian Garry's game that a lot of them could take advantage of. I just don't necessarily know if Darian Weeks is that guy. I agree with you. He has that big power, so maybe if he does catch Ian Garry early, he could hurt him, but that's the thing. I don't necessarily think it's his big power as much as it's just Ian Garry leaves his head very wide open to be hit, and we compared him earlier in the week, it was to Luke Rockhold, and it's true. He does have a very upright posture, and it will be interesting to see if that does eventually get him caught in the future. But this is sort of the question that I guess I'll bring to you, because we both, I'm assuming, are still going to pick Ian Garry for the pick. Do you think they are going to give him sort of that fast rise to the top? Because here's the thing about Ian Garry. I think he thinks very highly of his personality, and I think he thinks he is in that like S+ tier up prospects in the UFC. But are you a J. Cole fan? I know I am.
Yeah.
J. Cole has a line, and it's real G's move in silence like lasagna. Ian Garry, don't tell us about how good you are in press conferences. Just be good in press conferences.
It's like Shavkat Rakhmonov. It just kind of leaks out there that he's probably going to get the Neil Magny fight in the summer. Have I seen a ton of Shavkat all over the internet? No!
No, because Shavkat's good enough that he doesn't have to be like, hey guys, I'm really good. If Ian Garry does want to promote himself in that way, don't bring up other people who have done similar things to you have. Try to set your own path so that people will then want to try to follow along your own journey, because if people look at Ian Garry and think, okay, he's just trying to be like the second coming of Conor McGregor, we've already seen that story play out in the UFC, and we've already kind of seen it played out in Bellator with Gallagher over there. So for Garry, it would just be nice to see him sort of differentiate himself.
And and Matt doesn't know the difference between Lil Wayne and the man himself, J. Cole.
Sorry, that is a Lil Wayne line, my bad.
Prince Vegeta's son saying proper number 12 should sponsor Fight Night Picks, hashtag FNP. Maybe
nice.
Somehow we get Marcus Deegan to hook it up. I don't know if we can do that. The connection's still there. But Matt, when we do look at this one, I mean, yeah, I'm still going with Ian Gary. He's got like the little tiny like word line tattoos like Andrew WK, but the words are not straight lines. I don't know about that. I'm not a fan of that. But tattoos mean different things to different people. And we're both going with Ian Gary. Matt, we look at the first card on the pay-per-view. Now, if you're hanging out, there's almost 600 of you out there right now. And all it does is take a couple of seconds to toss a like. It would mean a lot to us if we get up to 500. I'll put some Da Bomb hot sauce in my mouth. I'll do something crazy. But Matt, when it comes to this fight, this is going to kick us off with the Fight Night Picks. The sidekick. And I threw it out there, but it wasn't quite on the camera. So we're looking forward to that. It's going to come up later on tonight. 9:45 p.m. Eastern is when you can check us out. We're going to be talking about the fights. We're going to be talking about them live. We're going to be having a lot of fun, like over in the chat. FM talking about Shavkat. And Joe saying, like the video, dudes. But Matt, when we look at this fight, Mark Madsen taking on Vince Pichel. It's a tricky one because Vince Pichel, and I paraphrase here, but Vince Pichel's like, listen, maybe I let Mark take me down. Maybe, Vince, you have 25% takedown defense in the UFC, and usually it's because people catch your kicks, and then it's just timber, and they kind of push him down. He kind of falls down a little bit. But for the man himself, for Vince Pichel, you look at it, and yeah, it's like Chumbawamba. He gets knocked down, but look at the guys that he's beat in the UFC. He's, 7-2 in the UFC since coming up on The Ultimate Fighter. The two losses, Rustam Khabibulov and Gregor Gillespie, two pretty darn good guys, especially Gillespie, but he fights once in a blue moon. For Mark Madsen, he's going from an opportunity in a Fight Night co-main event and a split decision win over Clay Guida to fighting a very senior member of this division once more in Vince Pichel. So Matt, we're splitting the pick at the start of the week. What are we saying here?
We've seen this fight for both guys play out before. It's kind of weird. For Mark Madsen, we all knows he's going to wrestle until his cardio won't allow him to anymore. Now the difference is he's not in that Shamil Abdurakhimov category to where age has caught up to him so much to where he can't really use his offensive skills. I do think Mark Madsen is that like top tier wrestler. It just really comes down to where is his cardio in this fight, because
we got to hit up that super chat, Matt. Malone Hart saying, what is your favorite snack for watching the UFC fights? When I'm watching them, and you know what? I can grab it right here because I actually have it as halfway of a prop. I have two.
Peanut M&Ms are my call.
I'm talking about because I'm cheap, the Kirkland Jelly Bellies, the big old bag. I like those. And then I've got Covered Bridge jalapeno chips over there too. Those are pretty darn good. So Malone Hart, appreciate the super chat. But continue on. I mean, you're talking about Mark Madsen. And apart from like his last performance against Clay Guida, where it was all striking, we've been used to seeing some of his wrestling in his fights.
100%. Now, the thing is, he won't be able to strike with someone like Pichel, because Pichel offers a much more power-hungry, I guess, striker than Clay Guida is, because Guida at this stage of his career can't really hurt people with his hands. I know him and Jim Miller had a very fun 45-second fight with each other, but you get the idea. Clay Guida is a little bit past it. I think Pichel is the much better striker, and I do kind of agree with that quote that he had the other day, to where if I do let him wrestle, it probably is going to tire him out earlier, and the faster I can get Mark Madsen tired, the faster I can start to take over this fight. I just think Madsen has more than 7.5 minutes of wrestling in him. You know what I mean? Like, he might only have 8.5 minutes of it, but I do think that's going to be enough to at least bank rounds. Because with Pichel, he is the more powerful striker without a doubt, but he's not like a top-tier power puncher by any means. So I do think that he is going to really have to use his volume effectively, and he's really going to have to make Madsen pay for his missed takedown attempts. So I guess that'll be my key to the fight. I think Madsen will win, but if Pichel can at least make him pay for those entries on all of his takedown attempts, maybe he will be able to damage him to where in the third round, if he is able to put some volume on him, he can get him away. But I do like Mark Madsen in this matchup.
Over in the comments section, I see it there from J-Boy saying, jelly beans are gross. J-Boy, there's 44 flavors. You don't like one of 44?
But the problem is, then you dislike 43 of them and you only like one.
Maybe you're the guy, J-Boy, that only likes butter popcorn. You just get up for that one. I don't like that one. We also have Tom Stout hitting up the super chats, or hitting up the regular chat. Sorry, Tom. But saying, Craig and Matt, I'm late to the party. You guys rock. Thanks for the insight every week. This is a great card. Really looking forward to this one. And as you always say, let's get into it. So I do appreciate that. Joe saying chocolate is better. Matt, when we have a look at this one, we'll go to at Fight Night Picks for the votes. 59% going with Madsen to 41% going with Vince Pichel. And Vince Pichel, when he gets taken down, usually does something with it. It's kind of crazy. And when you talk about the stand-up, he had Austin Hubbard rocked at multiple points in his last fight. Now, I know both these guys, they both fought Hubbard. And for Mark Madsen, picks up a decision win. And for Vince Pichel, picks up a decision win. But if you look at it for Madsen, a lot of the wrestling, very intensive. First round, second round, as you had said. Hubbard takes over in the third with Pichel. A little bit of back and forth. Pichel's able to get the win there. So again, we're split on the pick on this one. The fans are going with Mark Madsen, the Olympian, the silver medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling. And for me, I'm going to be going with Pichel. Now, Pichel open to plus 130. He's minus 118 at this point. Madsen open to minus 150. He is a minus 102. And over on best fight odds, that is the third biggest mover and shaker this week is Pichel. 35% clip, 52% for Gary. And number one is Alexander Volkanovski in that big-time main event. So, Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. We have Mackenzie Dern taking on Tecia Torres. They had a back and forth at that press conference that was really weird. Was that the nicest way to get under your opponent's skin?
I always go back. Do you remember when Pedro Munoz fought Cody Garbrandt? They just said very nice things about each other the whole time on the press conference. I always thought that was really funny. This was sort of a weird build-up because there was so much animosity between everybody else, and then there was like, oh, by the way, Tecia Torres and Mackenzie Dern, they're also on this card.
I gotta say this, and I'll hand it right off to you. Honest to goodness, and I see Brian Platt saying the evolution of Fight Night Picks been watching since the olden days. Well, I appreciate that, sir. But when I look at this fight, I'm really excited about this one.
It should be a really fun fight because the first question mark that you have to ask yourself when you're watching a Tecia Torres fight or when you're trying to predict one is, can her opponent match her physically? And now, you can do it in two different ways. You can either fight like Jessica Andrade and be extremely physically strong, or you can be really tall and manage your distance really well. Those are two different body types that do give Tecia Torres problems because her game is very much built around her offensive takedowns, her clinch control, and she has improved her boxing quite a bit as her career has progressed. Again, she's not someone who's going to go out there and really hurt you with her hands, but she just have fast hands and good combos to where when you look at just her stats at the end of a lot of her fights, you're like, wow, Tecia Torres threw like 190 punches in there, and you don't really... It's hard to grasp while you're watching it just because she is always doing something, but that's where I do think she's going to be able to pull apart from Mackenzie Dern. This is what I will say though. Dern physically, I do think will be able to match a lot of Tecia Torres' strength because Mackenzie Dern physically is as strong as a lot of these women in this weight class are. People have forgotten like just sort of the overall evolution of Mackenzie Dern. It was, I only do jiu-jitsu and pull guard, and then she's been able to implement a few more offensive takedowns into her game. Again, it's still kind of weird to see someone who is so good with her jiu-jitsu still struggle with offensive takedowns like she does, because you would think, okay, if you're Mackenzie Dern, what's my easiest path to victory? If I take people down, I'm basically one shot, one kill jiu-jitsu. Why wouldn't I just improve my wrestling to the point to where I could just go out there and kind of like Khabib people? It's not that her striking hasn't improved over time. I just don't think it's improved to the point to where she'll be able to beat Tecia Torres on the feet for 15 minutes.
Mark Acevedo bringing up a good point, saying like Dern's boxing is good these days, no lie. And again, I likened it to that Naaman Gracie fight against Mark Lemminger where he looked like a world beater. Like if this guy's striking's this good, he's going to be a champion forever. And then he goes out there against Logan Storley, and Logan Storley is a wrestler if I've ever seen a wrestler, Matt. Like, he does not strike on the feet. It's straight to the takedowns. Logan Storley looks like he's been a boxer all his life. Like, he's a golden glove like he's Aaron Pico. Like, he looked like he had those offensive skills in that fight. And Naaman Gracie didn't have anything to counter it. So, I do look at this fight, and I really wanted to bring it up. There was another comment over there talking about Tecia Torres, and I want to make sure that I get it, but I might miss it. So it was due to the fact that, yeah, I mean, Tecia Torres only loses against good competition. We're going to see what happens here. But if you look at the losses, Rose Namajunas, Marcos, and then Esparza over on The Ultimate Fighter, but that was back in 2014. Namajunas 2016, Andrade, Jędrzejczyk, Zhang Wei Li, and Marina Rodriguez through 2018 to 2019. Beats Van Buren, now Fortino. Beats Sam Hughes, who fights next weekend, and the biggest head scratcher I've ever seen in my life. And then beats Angela Hill. I still do have Tecia Torres in this fight as an underdog because I do like the volume on the feet. I do like the fact that offensively, defensively, in terms of her wrestling and her grappling, proficient enough to get out of some bad situations. Could Mackenzie Dern submit her? Would it be a giant surprise? No, it wouldn't. But I will say this. Tecia Torres, first one on the scale yesterday, looked great. And when you really factor it in, when you're talking about Tecia Torres, Mackenzie Dern, normally somebody that has to capitalize on a mistake of her opponent. Normally. So for me, I do like Torres here.
This is what I will, and I agree with everything you said, but I feel like this should be brought up as a bit of a red flag for Torres. her last 3 opponents, she was way better than all of them. Like, at a certain point, when you're fighting people that you're better than, you might have mistakes in your camp that we don't know about because you're so much better than everyone you're fighting that those mistakes are really coming to light. So it will be nice to see Torres back in there with someone who we look at as an elite fighter in this division, because I do think Torres belongs in this category, or she should be fighting people at least in the top 10. Because, like, Tisha Torres versus Sam Hughes was not a competitive matchup whatsoever.
And it was on short notice, but we'll move on to our next fight, Matt. We're talking about Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev, and I have heard so many people out there this week going, Khamzat Chimaev. What?
I only heard Chael, but
Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat is the man, and if I knew anything about this card, it's UFC 273, Khamzat Chimaev, and then everybody else. Because really, he has stolen the show. And Darren Till, kind of like a guy, he's like a Joey and the kangaroo that is Khamzat Chimaev. He's along for the ride. He's having a good time. And he's taking on Gilbert Burns, your second-ranked welterweight in the UFC. And this guy, Gilbert Burns, I mean, you look at some of the losses and you go, what? I don't remember those ones from lightweight, but they really are there. And when you look at it at welterweight, sure, he wasn't able to get the win against Kamaru Usman. He was able to rock him early, and then he ends up getting finished, and Usman got them hands. Probably not against Canelo, maybe against Triple G, but that fight would never happen.
Triple G would kill... He'd beat Kamaru in a round and a half.
But when we look at this one, Matt, for Gilbert Burns, he was able to go out there against Wonder Boy and really turn on the heat, and he was able to get a big time win. So over in the comments section, Lausnon saying Till has fallen in love. Maybe he has. And you've got the man himself, Mark Crowley, saying, I wish I had the remote from click to fast forward to this fight. That level of anticipation. People are fired the F up for this fight.
How could you not be? We're about to see if the most hyped prospect in the UFC is legit or not. Like, how could you not be more excited for a fight based around that one question? Because if Chimaev loses, not only does it reinforce just how good Gilbert Burns is, but it's going to genuinely make people believe that Burns can beat Usman in their rematch. Because like you said, he had success in their first fight. He was able to rock Usman early in their matchup. It fell off as that fight continued, but still, if Burns can go out there, could you imagine if he hits Chimaev with an overhand right, and then Chimaev like shoots a panic takedown, Gilbert Burns guillotines him, and that's how it ends? Like, that would be one of the wildest finishes I could ever think of in a UFC fight.
Bundle of Humble hitting up the super chat. The only person that's ever hit Khamzat Chimaev with a significant strike was Wales' own John Phillips.
Which is wild because John Phillips is a god. But for Gilbert Burns, I really do think the striking in this fight is where he's going to have to get his bread butter, because he's a much more kick-heavy fighter than Khamzat Chimaev is, and I do think that at range he might be able to have a lot of success, because when you're fighting someone like Chimaev, and this is what I think Chimaev's going to win this fight. You think Chimaev, everybody thinks Chimaev's going to win this fight, so just trying to bring up ways I think Gilbert as a huge underdog could win, but I do think that if he can keep this at kicking range and fight like Damian Maia should have, throw crazy strikes, throw everything with 100% knockout power behind it, and throw spinning back kicks to the body if you want to. Make Chimaev wrestle you because you're the most dangerous guy on the mat off your back. I really do think that would be a good game plan for Gilbert Burns, because you got nothing to lose when no one knows your name, to bring up an old quote that you like to do from Billy Talent a ways back. I do think that if Burns does have that go for broke mentality, force Khamzat to be the reactionary fighter, I do think Burns can have success early on. It's just, like you had said, physically when these guys faced off, Chimaev looks so much bigger than him. Like, Chimaev would have to cut off a leg to make 155, and Gilbert Burns was a lightweight at the UFC level, so I do think the physicality of Chimaev really is going to help him a lot.
Need more friends with wings. What a song. And a great band if you haven't checked them out. And they have a music video with Rose Namajunas and Donald Cerrone in that. If that piques your interest, we have a look at the odds for this one, Matt. And for some reason, Best Fight Odds decided not to toss them on the UFC 273 card. So we can go over to Topology, and we'll at least try and touch on them. Minus 500, little over minus 500 for Chimaev, plus 375 for Gilbert Burns. And if we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, Matt, 83% with Chimaev to 17% for Gilbert Burns. I think, again, physically, you have Khamzat Chimaev as the bigger guy in this one. The gas tank, always a question. He had that kind of 2-round wrestling match against Jack Hermanson. He was able to win. Hermanson's a strong wrestler at 185. So I do like that for Chimaev. Weight didn't seem to be an issue. He didn't have to cheat on the towel, gain that extra 6 pounds or whatever. So I did like that. I do like Khamzat Chimaev in this fight. And it kind of, it's always a pain. You do this, you try and take your fandom and everything away from it. I love a Gilbert Burns
How could you
fight.
not?
You don't want to see. This is one of those ones you
Seems
don't
like
want
a
to
nice guy,
see.
too.
You don't want to see either guy lose. So for me, I'm gonna go with Chimaev, but I'm keeping it off on my card.
This is what I'm going to say. The winner of this is probably going to get a title shot. I think a lot
What
of
Leon?
Well, okay, Leon is fighting Usman next, but you would imagine the winner of this would then fight the winner of that matchup. If Chimaev beats Gilbert Burns like he's been able to beat everybody else, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pick Kamaru Usman in a matchup against Chimaev, because you get to the point where eventually, okay, I understand Kamaru is an all-time great. He doesn't have any massive weaknesses in his game. But watching Chimaev not even face any adversity in anything mixed martial arts related in his whole life, it's getting to the point where I'm starting to believe this guy is unbeatable. So it would be nice to see if Burns can at least make him face adversity.
And Brian Levy is saying, or Levy is saying, winner fights Colby. Colby wants that Adesanya fight, and I was listening to Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. And, Israel Adesanya doesn't want that fight. So it didn't seem like he was all that hot on it. John Hansen saying, my cousin thinks this is scripted. Show him how good you guys are at being live. I don't know, John. I mean, every single week people think it's scripted. Brian holding cue cards behind us. But, Brian, you're doing a great job back there, pal. Matt, our co-main event of the evening. Now, we got to hit up the poll that's over there in the chat, which is 2 title fights, any and news. 51% now say yes. 49% say no. 49% think that Aljamain Sterling keeps his belt, and then you've got Alexander Volkanovski keeping his belt. So we'll see how that one plays out. For me, Matt, again, Aljamain Sterling is the underdog, defending his belt. Petr Yan, your interim champ, you get the win over Corey Sandhagen. It was an all-timer of a fight. It was one of the best fights of last year. And then we look at Aljamain Sterling, and I mean, he beat Corey Sandhagen in a much more impressive fashion. Got it done really quick. Submitted him, something that we don't see very often. And for Sterling, the time away, he's able to recuperate after the terrible injury. He's had the surgery. Physically, he looks like the best shape in his life. Hopefully he didn't peak too soon in any of his training. But I mean, I really did like what I saw out of him yesterday. When I look at this fight though, Matt, I mean, Petr Yan, we've been hyping this guy up since he made his debut. We were really excited about that Jin Susan fight. The John Dodson fight was fun. The Uriah Faber fight was fun, not for Uriah. But when it comes to this one, Matt, I've seen Petr Yan go out there against a guy who's having a pretty darn good career resurgence at 135 in Jose Aldo. And it was like he had 2 ping pong paddles, and the ping pong ball was Jose Aldo, and he went
like, Petr Yan is the closest MMA fighter to Terrence Crawford. And let me explain this, because Bud Crawford's by far my favorite boxer, and it's not even close. And what I really like about him is he's a really, really cerebral fighter. Like, he's the smartest boxer in the ring. But if you hit him clean one time, he just sees red and says, like, nah, F that, and goes into brawl mode. But he's still really smart when he goes into brawl mode. Who does that remind you of? Petr Yan. Petr Yan can fight from either stance, something that not a lot of fighters can do, and some fighters can flash a southpaw look at you for a second, or they can flash an orthodox look if they naturally fight from the other position, but for the most part, people can't fight for minutes at a time out of their improper stance. Petr Yan could do that without issue, and we saw that in the Jose Aldo fight, because Aldo did have good success with his leg kicks early on in that fight. He looked really good with them, and it wasn't really something we had seen from Aldo for a while, so it was nice to see Aldo go back to them, but it was wild to see Yan go, okay, you've beaten up my front leg when I'm an orthodox. I can just go to southpaw and basically be the exact same fighter. Throw all my combinations in the exact same way. And I don't really have to do any wholesale changes to my game. Wonderboy Thompson's someone who can switch stances very effectively, but he is a different fighter from the southpaw stance as he is from the orthodox stance. When he's in southpaw, he likes to use that front leg a lot more. Not all the attacks are the same. With Yan, though, he is a mirrored fighter from both positions, and I really do think that that is not just a unique wrinkle that he has, like that is one of the most X-factor attributes an MMA fighter can have, because if something's not going right for them, they can always change up the dynamic of the fight into one of 4 different ways. They can circle right as an orthodox fighter, they can circle left as an orthodox fighter, then they do the same from southpaw. It's basically like being 4 different fighters all in one, and it's always showing your opponent a different look. Now let's go over to Aljamain Sterling, a guy who gives up a lot of information early in a fight. Petr Yan will hide his best moves from you until he absolutely has to show them. As he's shown in a lot of his fights, he builds as the fight goes. Whereas Aljo, he has really good cardio, he has really good output, but it's almost to his detriment. I really do think that his crazy output early in fights is going to get him caught against someone like Yan, who really relies on those early reads to set him up for success late in a fight.
And we'll see how it plays out. I mean, you look at it for Aljamain Sterling, all the great wins, the win over Brett Johns, the one that he was able to get over Cody Stamann where his Sulev stretch was overshadowed by another Sulev stretch on the same card. I know it shows up as a knee bar, but it's crazy how dynamic Aljamain Sterling is on the mat, and that's not even a conversation in this fight at all. It's really, how long will Piotr Jan wait until he just lets the dogs out? And listen, like the Baja Men in the early 2000s ripping off a song from the 90s that was already used, I think for Piotr Jan, he's got a great opportunity in this fight. So I do look at this one where Jan, again, it is really, when does he decide to get going? Because for Aljamain Sterling, the question is, well, it's not even a question. It's Sterling normally does good work early and he's able to get things moving. My question is, Aljamain Sterling at full health, off of the surgery, the time away, physically he looks amazing. Is Aljamain Sterling going to decide to play chess too? Because if that happens, then who the heck knows?
So this is something I was going to ask you, and then I might as well just do it now then. Do you think that there is a world where the UFC would have given Aljamain Sterling like a boxing style comeback fight? Because you're right, he had a long time off. He does look really good physically.
You're the champ, you have the interim champ.
I understand, I'm just saying, for Aljamain Sterling, this is the one situation where I kind of looked at the whole thing for Aljo and thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice if he could have fought in like a non-title 5-round bout just to see how good he looked coming off the injury? Like, that's something that a lot of boxers do. They'll take a year off, they'll come back, and they won't immediately have to defend their title. They'll get sort of a warm-up fight so we can see how they look when they do get back. Like, Earl Spence Jr. fought Danny Garcia, and Danny Garcia is a really good fighter, but he's not a world champion. I just thought it would have been interesting. Like, this is one of the few situations where I could have seen the UFC doing something weird and be like, okay, Sterling, we'll give you a 5-round fight against Jose Aldo to see how good you look. If you lose, you might not lose the title. We'll do like a rematch for the title, and if you win, then we would do the Jan fight, because I really do think the fact that Jan was able to fight Sterling in between the Sandhagen fights is going to help him a lot, because that's just more experience for him to have.
And for Piotr Jan at Fight Night Picks, 80% of the voters going with him over the current champ. So yeah, both of us going with Aljamain Sterling in this one. And then in your main event, Alexander Volkanovski, Todd Johnson hitting up that super top, hitting up that chat. Todd Johnson, what's going on? Alexander Volkanovski taking on the Korean Zombie. Now, Matt, it was kind of a conversation earlier. Mark Madsen, I saw that in the comments, taking on Vince Pichel. He's got Fight Ready behind him. He had Fight Ready behind him in his last fight, and he looked nah. So you've got Korean Zombie. He's been with Fight Ready for a time or two. Since he's come back, since he had his mandatory military service, looked to me like Eddie Chow was in his corner when he fought Dennis Bermudez. And that went pretty well for him. And then things have kind of snowballed since then. So it really is a lot of fun to see that for the Korean Zombie. Henry Cejudo, I said it at the start of the week, before any of the embeddeds. Did you see what happened, Matt? Henry Cejudo, creepy pillows of people, gave him to Korean Zombie. It's all over Korean Zombie.
No, Korean Zombie, it's his children.
It's his kids, and it's on his Instagram, whatever. But Henry Cejudo and that pillow guy, they got a working partnership. We just got to throw those pillows out there. Throw pillows, sleep in pillows. They're pillow guys. They're getting in business.
What's your problem with it again?
Pillows are weird. But when I look at this one, Matt,
what?
Aljamain, it's like the Walmart print shop. Let's just make throws. Let's just get it all going.
Can we get that on a t-shirt? Just pillows are weird, Craig Allen.
Alexander Volkanovski doesn't mess around with pillows. Alexander Volkanovski having a time.
He dyes his toenails. I think he does mess around with pillows. Like
Donnie Dumphy in the early 2000s, you've got Alexander Volkanovski really, really looking to make an impact, really cementing that legacy as, is he the best featherweight of all time? And it's him, it's Jose Aldo, it's Max Holloway, everybody's up there on the marquee. But as Volkanovski looks to add to that legacy, he's waiting for a featherweight to wow him. And somehow, Korean Zombie wowed him, I guess, against Dan Ige. So you get a big-time fight right here. And Matt, when you have Volkanovski, when you have Korean Zombie, do you see this as one of those fights where it is somewhat of a clash of styles, or is this a really well-matched one and it should go down as maybe an all-timer?
You could call it a clash of styles, but when both fighters are so well-rounded, I think it does do this fight a disservice. Because it's not like Volkanovski can't grapple. Same thing with Korean Zombie. They're both extremely talented, really in every single aspect of MMA. Like, I wouldn't say either guy is below a 5 out of 10 in, like, any single one category in MMA. Korean Zombie doesn't have phenomenal takedown defense, but it has improved a lot, especially at this stage of his career, post-military layoff, when he did fight Dennis Bermudez in his first fight back. Before, it was a really big issue for him, and ever since, a lot of his fights have been either very, very fast or against predominantly strikers, but still, he has done a much better job at defending those initial takedown attempts from his opponents. I do think that will be important because Volkanovski, I think he's the more skilled fighter in this fight because if he does need the takedown, I think he's the more likely to take this fight to the mat. But Volkanovski's one weakness in MMA is he ducks his head a lot. And if he does duck his head in one of those TKZ uppercuts, he's going to sleep because the Korean Zombie might be a 145er, but like for some reason his uppercuts hit with the impact of a light heavyweight. Like it's just one of those techniques to where he hits much harder than he normally does, and he has a really good angle on it too. He can get it under the guard of his opponent to where they think they're guarding high, they can't really see it coming, and those are the shots that do hurt their opponent. This, it might not be a hot take, but I really do believe it. I know both not challengers, but Sterling and Korean Zombie are both big underdogs in their fights. I actually think the Zombie has a better chance of winning his fight than Sterling does his. And I know Sterling, he already had the original fight with Jan, so...
And it's a dub on the record.
Exactly, and maybe we have a little bit more information about that one than we do on this one, but I really do think that the Korean Zombie has a great chance to win this fight. Now, I'm not predicting him, and I'm not even going to say one of these, oh, well, at plus 400, maybe it would be a good idea. I really do think that Zombie's unique combination of being a real submission threat on the mat, and I know Volkanovski can fight his way out of a submission, but still, it is a threat when it does get down there. And with his power and combinations on the feet, I don't think Volkanovski's just going to walk in there and run over him like he did against, like, Jeremy Kennedy.
Yeah, we keep bringing up that Jeremy Kennedy fight. Maybe it's Canadian
It was
thing.
so one-sided,
It was really one-sided. So we'll keep the throw pillows with Korean Zombie, Alexander Volkanovski. Matt, you're saying, like, those little pillows that you put between your toes when you paint them, we'll get those done up for Alexander Volkanovski. All different kinds of pillows. But when it comes to this one, Matt...
I just think he has like 5 daughters.
Or that too, and that'd be a large pillow. A much more large pillow. So maybe Henry Cejudo can get on those if he gets the win.
Volkanovski's a good singer too. Very talented man.
He's like Jeremy Renner. But when we look at this one, Matt...
What can he do?
Alexander Volkanovski really does have all of it together. You look at his offensive wrestling. You look at the way that he's able to strike in some of these exchanges. I mean, I thought he wouldn't be able to hold a candle to Max Holloway. And look at that. He's 2-0 against the man. So it's kind of crazy to see that. Obviously, the Chad Mendes fight, we kind of learned a little bit about him, and then we learned a bit more against Brian Ortega. It's that level of adversity he's been able to come through. So, again, when you look at it for the Korean Zombie, I found it interesting in one of those shows. Now, everything blends into my mind at this point, but if we're talking Countdown Embedded, we're talking about that weigh-in show. They said Korean Zombie, investing in a sports psychologist, didn't really think the Dan Ige performance was his best, whatever. It got him a friggin' title shot. Like, it's crazy to hear those things. And when you can level up like that, look at Francis Ngannou after the fight against Derek Lewis.
That's a good point.
Leveling right up. So, a lot of fun right there. But for me, again, you look at the odds for this one. A lot of pot and popcorn for me on this card. Volkanovski open minus 330s, minus 719. For Chan Sung Jung, open a plus 265. He's a plus 497. Volkanovski, biggest mover and shaker on this card at a 54% clip at this point. So, Matt, Austin Laxton says that a Siakam jersey. It's a Christmas present from Craig Allen.
It's the Vince Carter one.
It's over! Yeah, it's VC. But, Matt, when it comes to this one, we're both in agreement here going with Volkanovski. So, I'm going to line the deck up once more. Matt, tell me one thing that you're really looking forward to, just in particular on this fight.
I want to see if Zombie can hurt Alexander Volkanovski because it's not a theory, but it's a working theory right now. I need a little bit more time.
Uh-oh.
I think Volkanovski's durability is getting chipped away at a little bit. I really do. Chad Mendes hurt him and dropped him. Jose Aldo wasn't able to. That was a very clinch-heavy fight. But Holloway hurt him a couple times in their rematch, and I think Ortega definitely cracked him a number of times in their matchup too. I'm just curious to see if Volkanovski can keep on getting away with this because that's my thing. If Holloway can hurt you with an uppercut coming up the middle, and Holloway, if we're looking at like a power versus volume scale, Holloway is all the way on the volume side, and Zombie's more towards the power side.
Donald E. guys hitting up the super chat, the big one, saying I would pay $74.99 just to watch Shemaya versus Burns. Happy anniversary, my brothers. Donald E. guys.
Thank you.
It is appreciated. Thank you so much to everybody who hit up the super chat. This is a big time episode. It's all thanks to you folks, so I really do appreciate it. If you can't hit up the super chat, you can toss us a like. Those are free. Matt, again,
But since someone brought up Pascal Siakam and you brought up the Korean Zombie and getting a sports psychologist, that stuff matters. It can turn you from being average to really good when you get your mind right. So maybe we could see a much more improved Korean Zombie.
That would be ridiculous. First fight on the card. Julio Arce misses weight. He's taking on Daniel Willie Cat Santos. Thundercat. Matt, I don't have him. and I have the guy that missed weight, and this is probably the least confident pick on the card now. I'm still sticking with Arce.
I think Willie Cat's a great nickname, but I do have Julio Arce in this one.
I can see Santos winning that fight. Matt, we have Piera Rodriguez taking on Kay Hansen. Kay Hansen also missed weight, and I switched my pick. I've got Rodriguez. If Hansen wins, it's going to be grapple, grapple, grapple heavy.
Which is a weird thing to say because I don't really look at Kay Hansen as like a really good grappler, but you're right. For her to win this fight, she really will have to implement her grappling, but I do think Rodriguez, especially at distance, is going to be able to light her up with her volume.
Piera Rodriguez's brother is Gianfranco Rodriguez. He was in a new show with Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor. If it wasn't a show, it was a movie. He was in a piece of content with Ewan McGregor. You know, the guy from Star Wars. Matt, Aleksei Oleinik taking on Jared Vanderaa. Jared Vanderaa, the biggest heavyweight. Aleksei Oleinik, former middleweight, fought Chael Sonnen at one point there. Used to be very fleet of foot. Used to just kind of walk himself around the cage. He was quick. Wins in 4 different decades, they say. And he's taking on a super short notice Vanderaa. And creepily, oddly, weirdly, I have Vanderaa as minus 125. First leg of the QMK parlay.
Vanderaa should win this fight. He's not the more skilled fighter, which is a weird thing to say, even though I do think he's going to win this fight. It's just his opponent is so much past his physical peak that it's hard to say Aleksei Oleinik can go out there, really confidently go get a takedown and have some sort of grapple-heavy fight, because I think a fight like that will really wear on Oleinik if he does decide to have one, so I do think Vanderaa should be able to win this.
And I mean, a lot of people over there in the chat, and especially over there on Instagram, going with Aleksei Oleinik. Want to make sure that I hit up those Instagram votes, because you guys do that week in, week out. 61% going with Oleinik to get the win. Matt, our next fight, Mickey Gall taking on Mike Mallet. We're split on the pick. I have Mickey Gall out of New Jersey. Now it's Sanford MMA. I'm going with Mickey Gall over the coach at Team Alpha Male.
I've got Mallet, but again, it's not a confident pick. We haven't seen the best version of Mickey Gall. Like, if there was 20 versions of Mickey Gall that came into the UFC, we're getting one of the worst versions, whatever timeline we're in right now. And I do think that if Mallet can keep this at kicking range, and not necessarily kicking range, but just long range to where he can use his jabs, set up his straights, I do think he'll have success against Gall. But this is a sink or swim fight for Mickey Gall if ever there was one. And I guess every fight, if we're being honest, is a bit of a sink or swim fight for Mickey Gall, but he really does need this win.
Matt, over there in the chat, MPTV saying, actually, I'm going to buy Matt a Chuck Hayes jersey. I'd like to see with like a late career, he got traded, and it didn't really happen, but like a Marcus Camby Raptors jersey. Marcus Camby.
Never a big Camby guy.
Legend.
I'm so happy that one of my favorite players of all time got inducted into the Hall of Fame. Shout out Manu Ginobili. What a guy.
Aspen Lad taking on Raquel Pennington. Aspen Lad's second leg of the QMK parlay to plus 150. That goes against the odds and the fans. So, yeah, maybe I'm not that hot. Man's not hot. We'll see what happens, Matt, but I've got Lad.
The best version of Aspen Ladd beats the best version of Raquel Pennington. I truly do believe that, because with Ladd, you have a genuine fighter who can finish the fight at any moment. If she gets on top of Raquel Pennington, her ground and pound really is that type of an X factor to where she can go out there and get the finish, be it in the first, second, or third, to where Raquel Pennington really is going to have to rely on her grind-heavy style to win this fight. So I do agree with you. I do like Aspen Ladd.
Right answer, YT. Hanging out, doing some MMA content out there. Over in Nova Scotia, Matt, La Nouvelle-Écosse. Let's go East Coast. Here we go. We'll talk about our next fight. We have Anthony Hernandez, Josh Fremd, both of us going with Anthony Hernandez.
I'm just curious to see what Anthony Hernandez overall ceiling will be in the UFC, but I do have him in this one.
See how that one goes. Hot Dog saying Aspen is the Bobby Dahlbeck of women's MMA. Listen,
that's pretty funny.
Bobby D hit some jacks last year. He had a quiet season. Nobody's focusing on it, and he wears almost Pit Viper sunglasses. They look like them, so that's pretty cool. Ian Gary taking on Darian Weeks. Going with Ian Gary. Choo-choo. We'll see how that train goes.
I'm like the best talker you've ever seen. You just haven't, heard any of my lines yet. It's just, I don't get, any good MMA personality has that one interview or that one line that we can all go to and recite or we remember. Ian Gary doesn't have a single one. Hopefully, if he wins this, he'll have, a great call-out in the back pocket. Could you imagine if Ian Gary called out, Matt Brown? Just signed a new contract. I know he's had a few losses, but still, that would be an interesting matchup. I think Gary's going to be able to win this fight, though.
We'll see how it goes. I think Darian Weeks, again, out of any of the big underdogs, Darian Weeks is probably the best option. Vince Pichel taking on Mark Madsen, split on the pick. I've got Vince Pichel.
Got Mark Madsen. Again, not a very confident pick. I think he will be able to use his wrestling effectively. It just really comes down to when do you believe his wrestling will no longer be effective? I think he'll be able to secure those first 2 rounds, but if you think Michelle can start to overtake Madsen in the second round, there's a very good chance he can win that second and third.
First, last, making the comparison, you think Ian Gary could be a top 15 fighter? Hope it's not a Brandon Thatch. Brandon Thatch
was supposed to have a main event against Wonderboy Thompson. Never happened.
It's like my Brandon Halsey. I love watching a Brandon Halsey fight over the pond. Matt, Mackenzie Dern taking on Tecia Torres. Both of us going with an underdog in Tecia Torres here.
She's the steadier fighter, but she's been steadier against a much lesser level of competition. So this is one of those meet in the middle kind of fights where it's like, okay, Dern, Marina Rodriguez, a step too far. With Tecia Torres, it's like, okay, you comfortably beat Angela Hill. We'll meet in the middle and figure out where we all belong. I do think this is a really fun fight, like you had said when we had originally broken this down, because for Torres, she was one of those kind of staples in the top 6 for a very long time, so I'm happy that she is able to get another big matchup later on into her career, but I do like Torres in this fight.
Landon Blankenship, apologies. I most confident picks out of those ones, Weeks, Aljo, Madsen, Ladd, Fremd, Santos, were split on some of those ones. I don't have a lot of confidence in Aljo. I don't have confidence in Madsen at all. Ladd's a plus 150. That's a tough one, Landon. Check back in next week.
Wait, you have Ladd in your question mark kicks parlay?
I do have Ladd. That's the only one out of any of those. I don't have Fremd. Like, it's a tough one there. So, Matt, we'll move on. We have Gilbert Burns taking on Khamzat Chimaev. I've got Khamzat here. I can't wait for this fight.
It's going to be a really fun one. It comes down to, is the guy who's huge and really, really good going to win, or the smaller guy who's really, really good? It should be a really fun fight, because I think everybody does realize just how skilled Gilbert Burns is, so no matter what Chimaev does in this fight, he will get the respect for beating someone like Gilbert Burns if he is able to do it. I think it will be a super fun fight, and we're going to learn something about Chimaev, which is the craziest thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this. Did you see that clip of Brian Stan before the Mark Hunt Derek Lewis fight?
I did, yeah.
And turned out everybody was like, there's no way he's talking about Chimaev. He hadn't even had an amateur fight at the time. Ariel Helwani asked Brian Stan if Khamzat Chimaev was in fact the welterweight he was talking about in Sweden, and he was. So Khamzat Chimaev has been good enough to be at least a recognizable name, training with people who weigh 30 pounds more than him since before he ever had a professional fight. I just need that to sink in for everybody, because that's a ridiculous statement.
Where's Guram Kutataladze when you need him?
Thank you. Just a name that should be out there a lot more. But no, I do have Khamzat in this fight.
And Laos not saying miss Brian Stan. I do too. Made fight nights great. He was at the one in Halifax. Matt.
But Brian Stan's doing very well for himself right now.
That
so
much
good
is
for
true.
him.
Aljamain Sterling, Piotr Jan. Both of us going with Piotr Jan in this one.
Such a fun fight, though.
And then when we go to our main event of the evening, both of us going with an and still for Alexander Volkanovski. But Matt, I couldn't be more excited about these when it comes to Volkanovski, Korean Zombie. When it comes to the fight that everybody's excited about, Burns, Chimaev, you have Dern, you have Torres, you also have Vince Michelle Madsen. I'm glad that's the opener to a pay-per-view card. I'm fine with that. We have the Fight Night Pick Sidekick. It starts later on tonight. If you're hanging out, if you're going to be at home anyway, if your significant other doesn't like MMA and you want to hear from somebody else and you want your questions answered, hit up that chat and join in the Sidekick. We'll be here talking fights tonight on the big screen. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. This is a pay-per-view that, like, you can get up for. This gets you up in the morning. It should be a good one.
I'm really excited for this. We have two phenomenal title fights at the top. You have arguably the best prospect in all of MMA, fighting one of the most dangerous fighters at 170. It should be a phenomenal card top to bottom, and I cannot wait to watch these fights with you guys.
9:45 p.m. Eastern. We start 15 minutes early. We get to kind of recap a little bit of the card. We get to kind of preview a little bit of it, and then it's just bang, bang, bang through all of those fights up there on that main card. It should be a lot of fun. So thanks everybody for tuning in with Question Mark Kicks. Next weekend, we have Luque versus Muhammad 2. First fight, Vicente Luque went, see you later. Get excited for Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor, because that was the main event of that card, UFC 205. But I think it's going to be a great time. So hopefully you can join in Sidekicks. Hopefully you can also check out the content that's coming out for next weekend. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so, because you'll know when we go live. Matt, as we always say, Fight Night Picks. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. place it, lock it, attach it, verteball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a verteball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at SimBody.com. You're really, really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at SimBody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.